Right. Looks like we are live now. My name is Greg Cox, and I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Yersak. Dr. Jill Yersak is Vice President, Mission Strategy, and she joined the ALS Association in October of 2015. And she's responsible for the creation and implementation of various mission strategy initiatives that span across the association's mission pillars, which you're going to hear all about, across research, care services, and advocacy. She's also responsible for communicating ALS research in an accessible way by developing and maintaining research information tailored to people living with ALS, their caregivers and loved ones, donors, and to scientific audiences. Dr. Yersak received her bachelor's degree in biology at Ursinus College in Pennsylvania and served as a research technician at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in human genetics and molecular biology. She completed her PhD at Thomas Jefferson University with a focus on neurodegenerative diseases and her postdoctoral fellowship under the mentorship of Dr. Ann Hart at Brown University, where she spearheaded an ALS research project in C. elegans, nematode worms. So while at Brown, she volunteered at the ALS Multidisciplinary Clinic and local ALS Association chapter. So I'm very happy to have Dr. Jill Yersak here to describe research across the ALS Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amber and Lori and Maura and the whole Northern New England team. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm sad that we couldn't be in person. This time of year is the best time in my mind to come to New England. As you heard, I did my postdoc at Brown and lived in Rhode Island for a few years and miss it dearly and can't wait to get back up in that area. So today I'm going to be giving an overview about some research that's really beyond clinical trials, and I'm happy to get started. So Amber, thank you for helping me with the slides, and can you just go to the next slide, please? So I want to just start with the clinical trial pipeline because that's where everyone thinks about when you think about research and participating in research. And this is one of the most exciting times I've been in the ALS space in my mind, in that when I first was, I'm not going to age myself, for a while ago when I started in this space, there wasn't much going on in clinical trials. And now we're up to 60 trials and 8,000 participants. This is a really big deal and something we've been excited about and watching closely over time. So the clinical trial pipeline is broken down into 3 different phases. The first phase is really just looking at a small number of people, looking at sometimes even healthy volunteers to get the dose of the drug right, and then whether it's safe or not. The second phase of the trial are typically 30 to 50 participants. They also look at safety, pretty much finalize the dose at this time, then start looking at an early assessment of whether it's tolerable and also whether it could be if it actually works as it's designed to do. Then the last phase is phase 3, and that's the largest number of participants, multiple centers in the United States and abroad, and looking at definitive drug safety, efficacy, whether it works as designed, and tolerability. And really to provide evidence to the FDA that this could be to support the approval of a potential new drug. And so if you just look at the phase 3, there's 12 trials, which is also really exciting. And so we're looking forward to seeing how this pans out. And the association is really proud to sponsor clinical trials up to phase 2 because the phase 3 trials are just too expensive. Next slide. So I want to just quickly, if you are eligible to, or think you're eligible for a trial, I encourage you to talk to your doctor. We have multidisciplinary centers across the Northern New England area, and they can have an honest conversation with you of whether or not you would want to participate in a trial. And if you want to find a trial in your area, we've been working with the Northeast ALS Consortium, or NEALS, for almost 15 years. And we sponsor a really great and straightforward clinical trial finder. And this is the website. And throughout my talk today, I'm going to be giving you a bunch of resources. And I'm happy to share those slides with you after my talk, so you don't have to do screenshots or anything. But I encourage you to look at this website and do a search, an advanced search. When you look for location, you could pick your state and you would pick interventional trial, which is a drug trial. And if you have further questions, I also would love for you to reach out to Carly, Allen, or Tara Lincoln. There are clinical trial liaisons, and you can call them or email them anytime and ask any question. No question stupid. They've heard everything. So please feel free to give them a call too. And they're really a great support system around anything you think about around clinical trials. Okay, next slide. So now to get that over with, because I wanted to start there, but really the rest of my talk, I'm going to focus on how you can participate in research beyond clinical trials. Like so if I'm not eligible, which is the majority of the population, unfortunately, what else can I do to participate in research, and how can I get involved and make a difference in our community if you can't be in a drug trial? So next slide, please, Amber. So one of the things that's been around for a pretty long time is the CDC ALS registry and the biorepository. And this is something that's really important in our community. And we at the association ask for increased federal funding for ALS research towards the CDC registry every year to provide at least $10 million. And each year we have fortunately been able to get that support for the CDC registry, which we're very proud of. And so the registry is important to identify risk factors and the cause for ALS. So there is a genetic component of ALS, but the rest of it is sporadic, or it's not in your family. So it's not, if you don't have a family history. So we're trying to figure out what caused this. And sometimes it could be something in your environment that we may or may not be aware of. So this is a really great way to look at things that you've been exposed to over your life, in your work, at home, in the military, and to pinpoint what potentially could be those environmental risk factors. And also look at maybe to identify pockets of the United States that have more people than normal of ALS. And then they could take that information and see, well, so many large number of people are sick in this area. Why? And kind of dig into more and figure out what's going on in that area. They also collect biological samples. So through the biorepository, which I'll talk to you about. And they also have a notification system to notify people who are enrolled in the registry about clinical trials in their area, both regular drug clinical trials or observational studies, which is a study or a trial that does not test a new drug. Next slide, please. So here's some information to enroll in the National ALS Registry. I encourage you to check out their website. We've worked with the CDC over the years to help promote this to across the country. And they've developed some really nice communications materials that really break down why you should be involved in the registry, how to get involved, and some simple step-by-step instructions of how to get enrolled and fill out the surveys over time. Next slide. So attached to the registry, and you must be enrolled in the registry, is the National ALS Biorepository. Now, biorepository is a facility that collects and stores samples of biological material. So they do in-home collections, either blood, saliva, urine, hair, or fingernail clippings, and take those samples and store them for researchers to access all over the United States. And so they also have a very small post-mortem study collection, but I think it's less than 10 a year. So it's smaller, but it's also, if you're interested, please contact the CDC registry around potentially donating something in the future. So this is how to get more information. And I encourage you to visit the CDC registry website and look up more information about both the registry and the biorepository. Next slide. Next slide. Perfect. So the another way to get involved in research is a program I run with my team at the association called Als Focus. And this is something we're really proud of and we've been working on for a couple years now. And it's a survey program that's really driven by people with ALS and caregivers. And what I mean by that is I have, next slide. I work with a patient and caregiver advisory committee with people with ALS, current and past caregivers from all over the country and all different stages of disease to help inform everything I do with this program. They help me pick the topics. They help me design questions. They help with the communications. And it's just a really fun partnership. And you can see to the right are my members. I have a couple new people that I haven't added to this, but we're up to around 25 all over the country. And honestly, this is my favorite part of my job, is to work with this wonderful and really thoughtful and generous group. They're so generous with their time. So the survey program really is designed to look at experiences and the needs and preferences of people with ALS and their caregivers as they face the disease. And as you know, and as you could imagine, those preferences and needs change over time as the disease progresses. And so we really are collecting this information about 4 times. We have about four to 5 surveys a year, and we collect this information in really short surveys. So usually it'll take you, once you register, 10 to 15 minutes to take a survey, because I know myself personally, I don't want to spend a lot of time taking a survey. I want it to be easy to do, user-friendly, and then you can be done. And the whole goal of this is really to create these robust data sets to that are designed and open and free to the entire ALS community to inform payment and reimbursement models, care service programs, legislation, and even patient-focused drug development. So this data is really important to help move our community forward in a really positive way and increase quality of life for people and their families. Next slide. So it's unique than other survey programs out there. First of all, it's an online survey, really easy to participate in, that you can take to the comfort of your own home. The data is free. So we have corporate sponsors because we have to pay for this program. But after a 6-month embargo period, all data is free and open to the entire ALS community. We do not hide behind a paywall. And all the data that you put in there is de-identified and confidential. And we take that extremely seriously, because this is a research study that's IRB approved. So this is something that we have to run through a committee to make sure everything we're doing is kosher. So in order to protect identity, we use a thing called a neurostamp, which is a really unique identifier. It's almost like your own, like a social security number that ensures participant privacy. And if you're in Als Focus and you have a neurostamp from another clinical trial you're in or another observational study, we can actually combine your information to one place and, again, create these really robust data sets around your disease journey. And then what's also really important, and I think exciting to our community, our local regions across the country, is we're able to look at data by region and demographics and as disease progression. So we're able to break down the data in different ways, can slice it in different ways. And so if Amber comes to me and says, I would love to see the Northern New England data, I'm able to give them specific data for your area to look at certain issues that we've surveyed in for the ALS Focus program. Next slide. So it's different from the registry. It's not, because like I said, with the registry, and that's why I started with it first, it really helps count people with ALS and new cases, and also helps to identify environmental risk factors, like I said. Whereas ALS Focus really is different, and that focus is around real-time needs and experiences throughout your disease journey, and giving your opinions of how you're impacted by the disease. And that data can help us inform at the association programs and care services, policies, and other really important initiatives that we spearhead. Next slide. Like I said, we take data privacy extremely serious. Once you sign up, you have a consent form to fill out, and then you're assigned a global unique identifier, or a GUID, or a neuro-GUID. And this is the form you have to fill out. It's really created just to de-identify you. And all identifiable information, data, and findings are safeguarded by very high standards with the GUID. And we're not the only people that use the GUID. This is not new. The NIH also has a GUID system, and the CDC registry is now also using a GUID. So this is something, again, that it's proven to work and to protect your data. your data privacy. And all of the data is stored right now at the Neurological Clinical Research Institute at MGH, or Massachusetts General Hospital, which is pretty local to you guys. So you have a really great partnership with them, and they store this de-identified data for us, and then help us disperse it open and free to the entire community after a 6-month embargo period. Next slide. So we try to make this as simple as possible. So look at the website, which I'll show you at the end. And this is the link for the actual step-by-step guide. But we do our best to answer all your questions and help you with registration. And if you have a question, there's a Focus email address on our website. You can email us directly and we can help you get answers. But again, this is for people 18 and over and have to be in the United States. And that's because of our IRB protocol, because it's a research study. And you can be a person living with ALS and a current or a past caregiver. And next slide. So we've made a lot of progress. I'm really proud of my team. Sarah Pervanta is my director, and Salam Burhani helps run this program. And it's just been such a great experience for the three of us to build this program together. We started with an insurance needs and financial burden survey, because that's when we talked to our patient caregiver advisory committee, that's what came to the top, and that's what they were most interested in. So we did that first. Our second survey was on what matters most. So what symptoms in your life matters most to you, and how does that impact your life? We just finished a caregiver needs survey over the summer, and that was really exciting. And I'll show you some results on that today in more detail. And we just closed the telehealth survey in September. And that's really timely, because with COVID-19, a lot of people with ALS and their families sought care through telehealth because it wasn't safe at the time to go to, or they didn't feel comfortable to go to a clinic during the pandemic that unfortunately is still happening, but I think is hopefully getting better. But we're working on the results now, which should be published soon. But if you look at our website, you can see that these are all published online. So when you fill out a survey, you can see your responses compared to somebody else generally. And then they're curated, and these beautiful data sets are put on for public download through the Harvard Dataverse at MGH. Next slide. So I'm going to give you some detail. I thought this is a really great survey that you may be most interested in, given in our audience today, around our caregiver needs survey that was done in the spring. We have over, these numbers are old, but we have over 2,100 people in our database now. And we had a really great response. We had over 600 people, current, past caregivers, and people with ALS to fill out our survey. So we're very excited with the turnout. Next slide. So we asked people taking the survey, our participants, how many hours of caregiving a week do you give or do you receive? And the majority of people actually, which we weren't surprised by, gave more than 30 hours per week, which is 60% of the pie. Next slide. We also asked what programs you used and needed the most. And Sarah broke this down really nicely. And we asked all these questions. We gave all these options, this whole chart. And you can see that home visits from nurses, occupational therapists, and physical therapists came as #1 programs most needed and used. And second place was training on general caregiving, which we've heard that, and we've been addressing across the country with caregiver boot camps. And then third place is palliative and hospice care services. And again, I'll send you these slides, and there's more detail on our website under the results section in the caregiver needs survey. Next slide. We also asked how prepared are you feeling right now with caregiving, new caregiving responsibilities. And you can see trends to the left, more in the somewhat prepared to somewhat unprepared. So this is something we need to know to understand. Well, how if you're feeling prepared now, let's drill down and see what we can do to help you prepare more. Next slide. And their top concerns we asked were worries about family, loved ones, emotional and physical well-being, and worries about the future, and then lack of time to relax and engage in self-care were the top concerns that we learned about. Next slide. And then we did a quality of life question that other survey programs in different diseases have asked around quality of life. And you can see it actually skews a little bit to the right to higher quality of life than I honestly expected. But I think there's always room for improvement on quality of life. Next slide. So together, the takeaways are that caregivers spent a large amount of time, over 30 hours per week, providing care. And so if you think about my job, it's like a normal work week's 40 hours. That's it's almost a full-time job to be a caregiver for your loved one. The most highly used and highly needed programs caregivers mentioned were home visits from nurses, occupational therapists, and physical therapists. About half of caregivers felt unprepared for changes in caregiver responsibilities as the ALS progresses. Caregivers prioritize their loved ones' well-being as their top concern, followed by worries about the future and their own self-care. And lastly, despite their concerns and responsibilities, quality of life was relatively high, more high than we expected. But again, I think there's always room for improvement. It could be higher. Next slide. So again, this is how you can find more information about this caregiver needs survey. And to the right is an infographic of a summary of some of the findings. So we work with our communications team and a science writer to help put together these results in a way that we hope is understandable and for the community to take a look at this and have understand the main takeaways of what we learned. And again, we share this data. So we share high-level data, but we give the data, these huge data sets for free that are de-identified to researchers around the world. And we hope, and we see this happening already, that they take this data and do their own research studies and learn from it and publish from it. Okay, next slide. So just want to thank our caregiver survey participants, of course, my patient and caregiver advisory committee, which is such a pleasure to work with, our steering committee working groups, MGH for helping with the data. And then we have 6 industry sponsors that help provide funding for this program that we couldn't do. Without the funding, we weren't able to move this program forward. So I thank them too. Next slide. So, I think I've given you a lot of reasons why to participate in Focus, but really we want to hear from you. You have your own opinion, and I won't know if you have a problem or if there's an issue unless you tell us, and then you really share your opinions with us. And again, like the survey data we collect really impacts policy decisions and key opinion leaders' decisions around important things like public policy, clinical trial design, strengthening care and service programs for people with ALS. And unfortunately, this is the reality, but like regulators and the government, a lot of times they won't move unless they have data, a research study to back it up. So this is a way to provide that data to make things move forward as quickly as possible, to make people's lives with ALS better. So please, when you have time, I would love for you to learn more and participate. And of course, you can always contact me or my director, Sarah, and I'm always happy to answer questions. Next slide. So this is, again, we have over 21 people in our community, and we're growing. We're hoping to get up to 10,000 in the next over 5 years. That's what our friends over at Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy were able to do, and I don't see why we couldn't either. So this is the webpage. This is how you sign up. And then as a fun update for this program, we're actually updating the platform, which we're going to be rolling out in February. So it's going to be even easier and more streamlined to participate. So please participate when you have time and sign up. And next slide. So those are a couple of examples of of research you can participate in, but there's been a lot of great work we've been doing at the association when I want to take the last few minutes to share it with you. Next slide. So we, at the association, one of my jobs is to run a roundtable program. And it's an opportunity to bring people with ALS and their caregivers around the table with subject matter experts, our industry partners, and government officials, including the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, and others, and sometimes even payers, depending on the topic, together in a room to figure out how we can solve these really big problems in our community. And because we know at the association, large problems like reducing time to diagnosis, decreasing complications, increasing clinical trial participation. These are really hard things to do. And we know that we can't do this alone. So it's a really a way to bring people together at the table in a collaborative and really safe atmosphere to help us get work done. So next slide. So these are the roundtable topics we've done. We are on our 6th roundtable. It's actually going to be next, oh my gosh, in like less than 2 weeks on November 3rd. And we have sponsors for this program. These are the industry partners that we work with. And so again, I bring people to the table around these really big challenges around some of these things, the topics you can see here. But when they're over, it's a really rewarding part of my job is I can take the feedback that we get and all the information that we collect from those couple of days around the table, or now virtual table, unfortunately. Oh, a note on that. We went virtual last year, obviously, because of what happened with COVID. But we're moving forward. We're going to do a hybrid model because it's easier for our community to participate and not have to drive in or fly in. And so they can still participate from the comfort of their own home, which is really exciting. Next slide. So once we have this, once we have these things, these meetings, I think about what's the most impactful thing that we can do with the information we gathered, and what's most feasible that we can do and create for our community that doesn't cost millions of dollars. And so one of the great examples of this that came out of our time to diagnosis roundtable was an early diagnosis guide called Think ALS. And this is targeted to general neurologists in your community. And it's a really exciting program and tool that we were able to develop with a working group that came out of the roundtable. So I worked with Dr. Suma Babu from MGH, Bjorn Osarkson from Mayo Clinic, Terry Hammond-Patterson from Temple University, and then Kathy Lohman-Hirth, and she's out in San Francisco. And we created a way for neurologists, focusing on general neurologists, to understand the signs and symptoms you should be looking for when you're diagnosing a person with ALS. Because we know diagnosis is a year or more, and we've heard horror stories at the roundtable, but in other settings across the country, how long it takes for a person to get diagnosed, misdiagnosis, how many unnecessary tests or repeated tests they have to get done, and we can do so much better. So our goal is to use this tool to get the awareness around ALS to general neurologists across the country in a really accessible way. And so we recommend, once you suspect ALS based on of these categories at the top, that you refer immediately to an ALS center in your area. And we give specific information of how to do the referral. And that referrals, those directions, because you don't want to get stuck in the referral cycle. We want to get you in as quickly as possible. And based on data we've collected from our own certified treatment centers all over across the country, and this is a goal, and this can't happen everywhere, but we would love to see a person with ALS get in with their first referral within 2 weeks. And I think it's doable. And we debated a lot about this, but I think this is something we can at least aim toward. And we provide a comprehensive list of ALS clinics in their area to either refer on to, or if they want to phone a friend, they can call them and say, hey, I have this patient, and what do you think? And then they can decide together what's the best next step for this family, versus either not being aware or not wanting to give a diagnosis. And there's other reasons why they get stuck in this diagnosis tree at the general neurologist, but we want to avoid that and get them to a center as quickly as possible. And then once they're there, people have a high opportunity to get onto approved drugs, get their care plan in place, and then do a lot of family planning that needs to be done in the beginning. Get a head start on that. And then if you're eligible at the time, depending when you get in and where you are in the process in the disease, you can maybe be eligible for a clinical trial. So there's a lot of great reasons why we did this, and we're really hoping to move this area forward in the association. Next slide. The last thing I wanted to cover is a genetic testing and counseling campaign. And this is something that also came out of the time to diagnosis roundtable. We found from that roundtable that there's just a general lack of awareness and understanding around genetic testing and counseling. And this has been a wonderful collaboration that we've created with our International Alliance of ALS MND Associations. They also identified this as an issue not only in the United States, but across the world. And we've been working together to pulled together an education campaign around genetic testing and counseling, because the association believes that upon diagnosis, people with ALS and their families must have the right to access genetic counseling and testing, current education about genetics, and also safeguards against genetic discrimination. So once you have, so these are conversations that we want you to be aware of, that you should be having with your doctor around whether if you have a family history with ALS or you don't. So even if you don't have a family history of ALS, there is a chance that you could still carry a gene mutation. And so why we thought about this and we prioritize this, the association, is that we are in the clinical trial pipeline that I showed you on my first slide. There's our gene therapies that have potential to make a huge difference for families with ALS that carry a gene mutation. And so if you get a positive result for a gene in a genetic test and you have proper counseling, you can decide whether you could maybe be a part of that trial, and hope that down the road one of these gene therapies are approved, and then you could get onto a gene therapy program if that's what you and your doctor decide to do. So anyway, we put together a ton of information that, together with the International Alliance, videos, a website, a landing page with information about the benefits and risks for genetic testing and counseling, what you should think about, and also a genetic testing or genetics discussion guide that you can print out and take to your doctor and say, this is what, this is the questions I should be asking you. This is how the conversation can go. And based on my family history, these are the options I have, are the potential test results I have through the genetic test. And it's really a conversation starter you can have with your doctor and genetic counselor. So we really hope, and I can put in the chat because when I actually wrote this presentation, it wasn't quite done yet. And it's actually a bunch of resources are now on the website that I'm happy to share with you via chat. So, and I'll give all the information to Amber and Lori too to share. So once I send it over, I encourage you to learn more about genetic counseling and testing. Okay, next slide. Oh, I did put this. Oh my goodness, I'm losing my mind. I did put these up. These are the links that we've developed. So please check them out. And if you want, and of course, if you have questions, always talk to your doctor, genetic counselor, and we're also happy to help you locally to point you in the right direction of who you should be speaking to and how you can get more information. Next slide. And this is the picture of the genetics discussion guide that I mentioned. And you can see it's kind of like it's a chart where you can follow where you are in this chart based on your genetic testing results and what that means for you and your family, and a way for you to discuss this with your doctor. Next slide. So, I thank you so much for having me. You are in a great area. You are surrounded by wonderful care services support across the region. Again, Northern New England, I'm very jealous of you. I want to live there, especially this time of year. It's so beautiful. And I was just in Boston this week, and it was like the lottery of weather. It was beautiful. And it made me even more want to come back. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm happy, Dr. Cox, to take any questions you have.
Oh, that was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Looks like we have at least the first person has asked in the chat. And so I'll let a few other folks try to ask questions. This would be a great opportunity. First, I want to say how excited I am to see the increased emphasis on genetic testing and counseling as a national issue, because I'm certainly biased. I'm a geneticist, so I'm excited to see that. I mean, we only know about 10% of the patients with true genetic underpinnings, but we know that there are going to be susceptibility genes in the 90% of patients that we still need to identify. And so maybe those biorepositories and larger scale genetic testing. So we had Dr. Brian Traynor on last year from the NIH, and he gave a great talk about genetic screening, genetic sequencing for the whole genome sequencing to identify new genes and new targets, because then the pharmaceutical industry has something they can focus on. So I'm really excited to see this all being added into the national discussion. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We're really excited too. And we're committed. We're moving forward with this and, committed to give best information we can. And then also, we're not physicians, but we want to make sure, you have the resources. You can at least start a conversation with your doctor and they can take it from there.
Right. And see if we can hook people up into the larger scale genome sequencing projects, because
right.
And I would love to have every patient's sequence information in a secure database, but that can be utilized for researchers to identify the next gene, the next target, to see if we can start moving the field forward even more. So that's great.
Yeah, and we're collaborating with Biogen in an Invitae ALS Identified genetic counseling and testing program, and they are sharing that data through a database. When we were talking to them through this whole process, we were adamant, like, you have to share this data. You can't just keep it. And they agreed. And so we're really happy that this data will continue to be available to researchers like you and then around the community. So we're hoping that we can identify new genes. And then, or if you have a gene, you think, well, is this a pathogenic mutation or not? We can follow people over time, because sometimes there's a variant of unknown significance, meaning mutation. You don't know if it's sure or not to cause ALS, but some person may then develop symptoms over time or get worse, and then we can classify that as a pathogenic or a mutation that's associated with the disease. So there's so much to learn.
Right. Oh, thank you very much.
Sure.
Hey, going to the chat, we have a question from Jean Fay asking about if she signs up for both ALS Focus and the ALS Registry, will data be merged by the GUID, or will I have the same GUID for both?
So the global unique identifier is umbrella, right? But so for each study you get, it's called a neuro stamp. It's kind of like a credit card number. So I get a credit card number for the Focus program. I have a credit card number for the registry, and through the GUID system, they can merge the data together. I still don't know that you're Dr. Greg Cox, but I know that, but I can see the data in one place. So it's really cool, because not only the registry and the Focus have these neuro GUID, or the neuro GUID program, but other clinical trials, so a lot of natural history studies and other studies have this system. So it's a way to see, like, if I ask a question around our newest surveys on mobility, and we just launched it last week. And if we can look at survey around mobility needs, but then, we look at the registry and see, well, are they what the risk factors around, like, is there an environmental issue that could be associated with the mobility somehow? So it's a way to, like, ask these really cool research questions that you can't just do with one survey alone.
Right. Oh, that sounds great. And feel free, anybody in the audience, to continue asking questions. So I wanted to go back and kind of look at the programs that you've rolled out and that you're getting good traction initially. Where do you see things going beyond those? What are you most excited about in the future?
Yeah, I think we're really excited about, well, I'm excited because we're rolling out a new version, or we call it version 2.0. We need a better name for Focus. And so we're making it more of an online based program. So you're not going to have to sign into a portal. And so we've had issues with, like, passwords and login. So we're going to eliminate all of that, and you're just going to get a personalized survey link. So that's really exciting. And then the other thing we're working on that I can start talking about is a clinical trial match system. Yeah. So through the demographic information we collect from the Focus program or through our care services intake forms across the country, we'll ask you whether or not you're interested in a clinical trial, getting information around a clinical trial. And so then a company X says, Dr. Yersak, we're looking at this trial, and this is our eligibility criteria. So I could take that eligibility criteria and match it to people in our database and say, you've opted in to get more information about trials in your area. And you, based on the information you provided, you may be eligible for X trial. And then I can give them information to the company, a contact of the company. So we're not giving the company your information. That stays with us. So that's still confidential, but we can at least notify you and say, hey, based on this, we can now you could be eligible for this trial. So instead of having to search on your own, which can be hard and confusing, we do that search for you, which is I'm really looking forward to hopefully rolling out by mid-year next year.
And that takes into account eligibility requirements, et cetera, to see where they might fit in.
Yeah, so we'll be working with each company individually around what are their criteria. Some are more lax than others, depending on what they're testing. So some trials, are more pulmonary based versus something more muscle limb based. So it just depends on what the trial is, and that's how we'll match.
Okay, well, that sounds great. So you talked a little bit about, these surveys and trying to get information, kind of epidemiology sorts of information. Can those be rolled into larger epidemiological studies? That's not my background, but I know how difficult those studies really are, especially in a late onset disease. You've got a lifetime of exposures and occupations. And so I don't know, I'm sure you've tried to make your surveys as short as possible, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But, for those that might want to then go on to larger studies, or can epidemiologists hook up with this to try to make larger studies and recruit patients that way?
I would love that to happen. Really, because we have these. So I'm not a data person. I'm going to admit that out front, but I have a really great data team that curates these beautiful data sets with data dictionaries to understand. So you could take this data as a researcher or an epidemiologist with this well curated or organized data set, and then take that and do your own study on that, and can build from there. And we're happy to collaborate in the future. We're open to collaborations, and we want people to contact us and say, like, what do you think? Like, can you send this to us? And we have you honestly to share the information. You fill out a very standard data sharing agreement, essentially saying you're not going to de-identify, you're not going to try to de-identify the data we give you, and then we give it to you.
Very nice.
Yeah.
We had a question here asking about a research newsletter. Do we have one that the patients can follow to see quick updates?
Yeah, we just started back up again. So when I came to the association, I actually started in research communications, and we had a research newsletter, and then recently we stopped it, and then we actually recently brought it back in a new and better way. So it's shorter, it's easier to understand, and it's links to like stories that we've covered in research, researchers we highlight, researchers that we fund. My colleague, Dr. Kuldip Dave, our chief scientist, who's fabulous. I'm sure you've seen him talk in the past at this symposium and other symposiums across the country. And we collaborate together, the communications team, to put something together that really accumulates all the news for the month into one place. And so it's, thank you for asking that, Amber, because I forgot to mention that. And I can send you a link to sign up for that newsletter.
That's great, because research results are always coming out and things are changing. So trying to keep on top of it is really difficult. So if you have a way to consolidate that information, that's really helpful.
It is. It helps me too.
Yeah. So I don't see any more questions from the group. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to pass on to the folks, kind of in summary?
Yeah. Thank you again. Thank you for moderating, Dr. Cox. It's always lovely to see you, and thank you to the Northern New England team. Always so much fun to work with. Hopefully we can be back in person someday soon. And I hope this, for me, I was really excited to give this talk. So I was hoping it would give you hope, people in our community hope, that even if you're not eligible for the trial, there's other ways to contribute to research in a really meaningful way. That's non-invasive, and it doesn't take a lot of your time. And so you can pick and choose what you want to be a part of, but I want you to know that there's things to do, and if you want to, and if you don't want to, that's also fine too. But I want you to at least be aware. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to come today to give that information.
It's great and wonderful having you back. So I'm sure we're going to probably invite you again in the future. So
I
thank you.
love that.
So for Dr. Jill Yersak, that was wonderful. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye, all.
Bye.